Become a sustaining member of the Commonwealth Club for just $10 a month. Join today.
Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm Michelle Meow, host and producer of The Michelle Meow Show, and also a member of the Board of Governors for the Commonwealth Club of California, the longest and oldest running public affairs forum in this nation. This is one of many, actually over 350 virtual programs the club has produced since the pandemic. We hope to see you again live at one of our in-person events, but until then, we hope that you're staying safe and healthy. You can visit commonwealthclub.org for our full programs and for podcasts and past shows. The Asian American community is still reeling from the tragic deaths of 8 people, 6 of whom were Asian American, after a mass shooting that targeted Asian massage businesses in Atlanta, Georgia. There are many things that you can do to show support for your Asian American community members, whether it's a simple check-in to see if someone is doing okay, or speaking up and out and against anti-Asian racism, hate, and violence. All of it makes an impact. All of it matters. Tonight, we're sharing and highlighting the work of 3 incredible AAPI leaders who are doing the grassroots work collaboratively with all of our community members to ensure that we're all safe. Before we begin our program, I'd like to give thanks to the Commonwealth Club of California for providing the platform for us to come together to have this conversation. And also, I'd like to give thanks to our sponsor, Allie, Polly, and Associates. Here's Allie and Polly with a special message.
Thank you so much, Michelle. We're proud and honored to support tonight's important discussions on AAPI women leaders who build coalitions in their communities. Polly and I are sisters. We immigrated from Laos. We experienced racism, sexism, misogyny, and hate. While those situations are difficult, scary, and unjust, we also have experienced the power of our communities coming together to overcome these barriers. Being healthy and safe is important to all our communities. For us as AAPI women, immigrants, mothers, neighbors, and entrepreneurs, it is important to us that we're not only healthy and safe, but also financially dependent and strong.
That's right,
Right?
Allie.
Yeah,
that's right.
that's very
That's
important.
right. That's right. It's we have been working on educating the community about financial planning, such as 401k, and how to properly safeguard their financial well-being in the event of premature death and any devastating illnesses. With new tax law coming up, it's important people know the changes and the impacts on their retirement accounts. We are committed to our community to ensure we protect your hard-earned money. If you would like to hear more about these changes, please do not hesitate to contact us. We're here for you, and we would love to hear from you. We have financial professionals in 50 states speaking multiple languages, and myself and Allie, we speak Laos and Thai, right? So let's make sure that we all are living our best and free of hate and inequality. Thanks again for being with us. And now back to Michelle to begin her show.
Thank you so much, Allie and Polly. We couldn't have done this without you and your support. Without further ado, I'm very honored to introduce to you our speakers tonight. And just a reminder, you're joining us, you're in the Zoom room. Use the chat feature to send us your questions and we'll get them to our speakers. So tonight we have Nikki Kalma, aka Tita Ida, who is currently the Director of Engagement for the San Francisco Community Health Center. Her activism and advocacy is not only well known, but already considered a legacy. She spearheaded remarkable initiatives and programs to prevent the spread of HIV/AIDS in the AAPI LGBTQ community that has changed and improved many lives. Nikki was also appointed by then Mayor Gavin Newsom to be the first transgender member on the Commission on the Status of Women. She has raised significant support for various organizations, including the Transgender Law Center, AIDS Housing Alliance, and API Wellness Center. We also have Leanna Louie, who is the founder of the United Peace Collaborative, a nonprofit organization of dedicated volunteers who provide foot patrol in San Francisco's Chinatown district. Founded in March of 2020 after hearing then President Donald Trump call COVID-19 the China virus, Leanna started United Peace Collaborative to address the rise in anti-Asian violence. Leanna joined the US Army at 18 years old upon graduation from high school. She has served 5 years as active duty enlisted, trained in general medical and pharmacology at Fort Sam in Houston, Texas, and is also an entrepreneur in the Glim Super Alkaline High pH water cleaner business. And finally, we have Bo Talyarabe, who's the founder and executive director of Coalition of Asian American Leaders in Minnesota. She is a dynamic change maker who also co-founded the Asian Pacific Institute on Gender-Based Violence, Hmong Women Achieving Together, Sisterhood Laos, Red Green Rivers, Building Our Future, a global campaign, and the Building More Philanthropy with Purpose, BMPP Giving Circle. Let's welcome our speakers tonight. Everyone, thank you so much for being with us. Why don't we start with sharing, your work and information about your organization, and give some space and time for you to address kind of how what's been going on has impacted your work. We'll start with Leanna.
Okay, so United Peace Collaborative, we're a bunch of volunteers. We actually started very small last March. It was just a few of us, and now we have grown to over 50 volunteers that patrol San Francisco Chinatown. So unlike a lot of other volunteer organizations, we are very organized. We have a tracking system of all the incidents that happened, and we have protocols. We train people what to look for, and we have steps that we train them. So it's very organized, and we also have volunteers sign waiver forms and take their driver's license as well, whereas most other organizations just kind of like invite people in and then they just go out to walk, and they don't really have like records of stuff. So the main reason why for our organization to be that organized is because we actually also work with other organizations such as Stop Crime SF, which is a court watch group. And we also work with SFPD, which, they are a government entity, as well as other nonprofits that have patrols out there. So over the last year, we have logged 56 cases, and they're different things. So our cases can be medical assistance to senior citizens, or just helping them with certain things, and includes graffiti removal. We've removed over 600 graffiti tags in Chinatown. We also do give food to the homeless, and we have caught people who were stealing. We caught people who were trying to break cars. We've prevented many car break-ins and window break-ins of businesses and residents. And we've also de-escalate and moved people who were hostile towards residents who were trying to get into their homes. And we also helped remove somebody that was staying in the hallway of one of the buildings that he's not supposed to stay in, and he was scaring the children and the women that were trying to get to their doors. We have so many cases, but of all the cases that we have, 12 of them actually led to arrest. They were actually crimes. 4 of them from the night of the looting on May 30th. After some protests that were going on in San Francisco and around the world last year. And we had also got 4 graffiti taggers, which did some massive destruction to buildings, historical buildings in Chinatown. And we also were able to get people who were stealing in Chinatown arrested, as well as a couple of very violent offenders who one assaulted a security officer in Chinatown, and another one assaulted somebody who was just walking on the streets for no reason. He was assaulted. So we were able to work with the police. We take pictures, we observe, record, and report. So we take photos, videos, and we submit those evidence to police so that they have very solid evidence so that they can follow up on their arrest and also send the cases to the DA. Now, what happens at the DA's office? We don't know. They haven't provided us any updates yet, and we're really frustrated about that. That's where we're at right now.
Thank you. And we'll talk more about all that work. Bo?
Hi, good evening, everybody. My name is Bo Taurabe, and thanks for having me tonight. I am executive director for an organization based here in Minnesota called the Coalition of Asian American Leaders. We're a social justice network that harnesses the collective power of Asian American leaders to improve the lives of community. And so we really do our work through both organizing communities to understand issues that are impacting them, building social justice leadership among Asian Minnesotan leaders, and then working collaboratively and in solidarity with other communities to create systems change. So a lot of our work really embodies paying attention to what is impacting our communities, and then developing solutions that include things from anywhere from research to policy to leadership development to really community organizing to ensure that we are indeed contributing to creating a thriving community for everyone. So that I will stop there because I know we have a lot of questions and we'll be in discussion more about the issue.
And Nikki?
Yes, hi, good evening. I'm so happy to be here. My name is Nikki Kalma, and also for some know me as Tita Ida. I'm at the San Francisco Community Health Center here in San Francisco. We have been around for almost 30 years here in the Tenderloin area, where we have served pretty much most of the Tenderloin. But our organization originally started at the height of the HIV/AIDS epidemic, where we were once called API Wellness Center. A lot of our work is rooted in serving the Asian and Pacific Islander communities here in San Francisco. It just so happened that we were given a federally qualified health clinic status, and we had to expand all our services because, you know, HIV has been looking very different 20 years ago to now. So we have to expand and make sure that we are able to serve and attend to the needs of many of our clients. However, we did keep some of our basic groups and programs, such as our Joy Luck Club, which is for API LGBTs who are living with HIV. And we also have our ATE program, which is the transgender empowerment program, and also our the Connection program, which serves Asian and Pacific Islander men who have sex with men. Just a little bit of what we've been doing for the past year since the pandemic kicked in is that we really, as an FQHC, we've been mandated to really serve the community. You know, we are open 40 hours a week just to make sure that folks who need any medical assistance or medical attention, that we can attend to them, and if not, refer them out. And we also have developed and worked with 3 other organizations: GLIDE, San Francisco AIDS Foundation, and also the Curry Center, in which we call it the COVID-19 response team, where we were able to bring street medicine to folks, for the folks in the Tenderloin, and we were able to conduct them there at the streets for them. You know, there's a lot of things that we did pretty much this past year, excuse me. But I'd love to talk to you more about it later. And yeah, that's who we are.
Thank you all so much. So with that being said, you know, all of you have been doing your work in different ways, different, you know, methods, and it has evolved, and such as like Leanna starting a foundation or an organization in reaction to what's happening. But what's happening with anti-Asian racism and hate isn't something new. And so I'd like to start with Bo in helping us really understand. I think the foundation of your work is because of the injustices our communities have been impacted by. And so it's really important to understand that this is nothing new. We actually we're anticipating the rise in violence and anti-Asian hate incidents because of the pandemic. Bo?
Sure. Thank you, Michelle. Yeah, I mean, I think that what happened in Atlanta is heartbreaking and tragic, and you know, causes a lot of anger in the community. But as you said, it's not a surprise to the community, right? Who have been saying for the past year or a bit longer that they were, experiencing these types of targeted hate, but also that we have a long history in this country of anti-Asian racism. So this isn't the first time that Asian Americans are targeted by racism, and for centuries, the US has really excluded Asians from entering the country except as exploited workers, right? So anything from the Page Act Amendment in 1875 that barred Chinese women from immigrating, to the Chinese Exclusion Act, to the incarceration of Japanese Americans, the killing of Vincent Chin. I mean, there's a long history there that really shapes our community's immigration path here, as well as the experiences of anti-Asian hate that is, I would say, both interpersonal and systemic, and is important for us to acknowledge, because I think sometimes when we see the harm that is being done, we want to sort of just point to one person, but it's very much linked to a system that makes our communities feel othered, right? And that it's not that this hasn't happened and it's just invisible. It's a silencing of the community, right? So, but we certainly have been hearing about this, and so, throughout our history, both the US history and our immigration and economic policies, we've treated Asians as disease-ridden, criminal, subhuman, super, human, uncivilized. So I just want to remind folks that the model minority myth that we have today was not the way Asians were perceived before the civil rights movement, where Black people demanded equality, right? And that the model minority myth is really created not to respond to Black communities. And so, but what has happened since the model minority myth, and now also the constant state of feeling like we're perpetual foreigners, continues to both make our community's sufferings invisible, and also excludes the community from conversations about racism in a way that acknowledges the pain that they're experiencing. So I'll just touch on that, because I am sure that both Tida and Liana also have things to add. Yeah.
Nikki, I'll head to you next. I mean, as a member of the LGBTQ community and on transgender and AAPI and woman, there's a lot that you could say about the history of anti-Asian, hate and racism and violence, and also anti-LGBTQ.
Yeah, we need more than this hour, if we're going to talk about it. But I appreciate what Bo has mentioned, given that history. And also want to, kind of like step back with what Liana said in regards to, we have reported, I've seen many reports being given to the DA, to the police officers and everything. But what happens up there, we don't know. If it's being dealt with, is it being fairly heard and all this stuff. And for trans folks who are API transgender folks, there's a lot of barriers that you have to consider when they are reporting hate crimes or crimes that are being done against them. Like, for example, language barrier alone is one big factor that sometimes and we experience this in terms of, like, they don't take us seriously. They don't take the complaint seriously, that they don't take the reporting seriously. Plus, I think it's the stereotyping of all Asian Americans who we are all, I mean, especially in the transgender community, like we're all sex workers, we're all drug dealers, we're all, I mean, all negative, you know, those things come in place first. So I think that there should be really the awareness and the consciousness should be brought up like 10 times up, you know, in terms of like who we are as a community and who we are as a people. So, I mean, it's really unfortunate this is happening right now and it's more amplified. It's not new. It's not new. This has been going on for the longest time. And it's just now that you know, it's unfortunate that we have to talk about it now, but we should have been talking about this for quite some time.
And finally, Leanna, again, yes, the history of anti-Asian racism and hate incidents. We know that seniors or elderly, the Asian elderlies in San Francisco, the Bay Area, have been targeted for quite some time. And, you know, talk to us about the leading up to that moment that you heard the then president, Donald Trump, you know, say that COVID-19 was a Chinese virus that led you to create the organization.
Yeah, so even before that, like in 2019, there was that actually the president of the Chinese 6 companies, Mr. Wong, he was beat on Stockton Street, and when his friend came to help him, his friend was beat too. They were robbed of their valuables, and it was just like really. When I saw that, I was like, something is really wrong with this picture, because you see all these other people there. It was not like nobody was there. There was like maybe 40, 60 people there in broad daylight. It happened and nobody did anything about it. So I was really upset about that. And then, you know, we were just hoping that things would go away. You know, that was an isolated incident. It'll never happen again. A couple months later, in January 2020, a lady on Stockton Street was beat and dragged, and she was robbed of her valuables. And then a few weeks later, in Bayview, where I live, there was a older Chinese gentleman. He was in his 70s. He was just trying to collect cans, and he was harassed and assaulted. And not only that, but the video went viral, and it was full of hate. And that was so concerning for us, because I live in the Bayview. I grew up there. And so I had to talk to my neighbors there, and when they had a rally, I had to be there and just talk to them and say, hey, you know what, this has to stop. You know, we just can't keep going on like this. And so, you know, excuse me. And a month later, then we go on TV, you know, we're watching TV and listening to all this COVID stuff. And next thing you know, the president is talking all this nonsense about it's a Chinese virus, Wuhan virus, all that stuff. When in actuality, nobody knows where it's from, not even the scientists, because Wuhan is the largest transfer airport in China and possibly the entire world. That means everybody that needs to go Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, or anywhere in China, you have to go to Wuhan to transfer to get to those other destinations. So almost everybody from around the world stop there before they go elsewhere. So for all we know, that virus could have came from anywhere in the world, but it was discovered there. So that is a distinction that he needs to make. Is not a virus that we don't know where it came from. Nobody knows where it came from. But so for him to call it a China virus or Wuhan virus is absolutely wrong. It's hateful, and it causes people to fear the Chinese people and cause people to believe that we are the virus and they are out to destroy us. They believe that killing us means killing the virus, which is absolutely not true. And there are lots of ignorant people who do that, and they don't have to be a Trump follower to believe that. They could be just anybody off the streets who's ignorant about it and who relates, who thinks that Chinese people are the virus. It could be anybody. It doesn't even have to be a Trump supporter. So it makes us targets, and it makes it very dangerous for us to be out there. And you can see over the last 12 months, the FBI has logged over almost 4,000 cases of hate crimes against Asian Americans. But how it's charged in the DA level and at the cities and counties, we don't know. Nobody's tracking those. So that's very concerning for us. But so as far as that's what led us to believe that we need to go do something about it, because we were waiting for a leader to step up. We could not wait anymore. We just had to be the change. We just had to be the leaders that were needed, necessary. it's not something I want to do. I wish I never had to get into it, but now it's like, you know, I stepped up with a lot of other people who decided to step up. You know, they did their thing, I did my thing, and this is UPC. We're getting more and more members. And not only that, I have people in Los Angeles contacting me. We drove down to Los Angeles last month and we talked and got some people together. And now they're doing patrols. San Jose, we just trained San Jose in the beginning of March. Now they just started patrolling there. We were in Oakland in middle of February. We went to the rallies there and got a group of people who started patrolling there. And now they have like 6 different groups in Oakland, which is not started by me, but started by other leaders in the community. And I'm just so proud of them for all stepping up, because there's no one person that could do it. It takes everybody's help to do it. And everybody can do something. You don't have to necessarily start a patrol or do a patrol. You can do it. You can help in other ways. You can help just by clicking on the share button on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, or just making a response stating that, you know, you are against people who do all this violence towards Asians, making a statement, not being silent about it. Just those little things make a difference. Not only that, but if we have rallies, come out to the rallies. If you don't want to be the leader to shout, at least be somebody to chant with us, you know, to be back there to support us, to back us up. And if you could write letters, you're good at writing letters, write letters to your legislators, tell them what needs to happen. They need to have legislation that protect Asian Americans in this crisis right now. It is a crisis. Close to 4,000 cases is a crisis.
Yeah.
So, and some people do court watch. That's so important. So if you can do court watch at home, you know, you can follow the cases, see where it's at, when the next court date is. Let us know if you want to rally at the courthouse, or if you want to rally at City Hall or wherever. Let us know. If you're in San Francisco or Bay Area, I'll be there. But you know, also connect with other people. So if you're in Atlanta or in South Carolina or North Carolina or whatever, and you don't have a leader out there, connect with people, because everybody knows somebody. Everybody knows somebody that could help. So, you know, so let's keep talking. Let's keep talking about these subjects and don't let it die, because the minute that we get silent about it is when it's going to get worse. So do not be silent about it.
That's a great segue to the next question, which, you know, listening to all 3 of you, knowing that this has been our history since the Chinese Exclusion Act, you know, many years ago. Well, what we're experiencing are symptoms of something that is broken, something that continuously, you know, re-traumatizes us over and over and for many decades. And so whether it's organizing and mobilizing in this way to address the situation today, or it's, you know, changing some policies that we desperately need, I'd love to hear from each of you and kind of what your thoughts are of how we address this, how we move forward. Is it, you know, putting pressure on the DA to prosecute? Is it more law enforcement? Is it more housing? Is it breaking the horrible cycle of poverty in this country? I'd love to hear your thoughts on how we change it from being, you know, these symptoms to actual solutions so that future generations are not experiencing this. We'll start with Bo.
Yeah, I've been getting that question a lot, obviously, because I think sometimes when individuals are harmed, we think that the police are helpful, but I just want to say that, you know, we really can't police racism away, right? That even though there has been hard-won hate crimes laws, what we know is that our current system of policing isn't fighting racism, right? And it's not protecting individuals. And so what Liana and that's actually what is protecting communities, that it's about communities keeping each other safe, and not necessarily a system of policing that punishes crimes of poverty or those kinds of things. And so I really believe that, and also in recognition that policing has disproportionately caused a lot of harm and pain and death, especially in Black, Native, Latinx, and LGBTQ plus communities, right? That we are in this together. And so the question isn't just how are we keeping Asians safe? It's how are we keeping everybody safe? And yes, we need to do a lot of education so that Asian Americans and Asian American history is included. And how racism shows up for us is different than how racism shows up for another community. But I do think that it's important for us to address the root causes of gender and race-based violence, right? That these are, but I also want to say that communities are not vulnerable; they're made vulnerable, right? Which in turn creates conditions that are that leave people unprotected, and so then they face interpersonal or systemic violence. You know, just this past week, we had 4 Hmong women who were killed by their intimate partners. And so, yes, I'm devastated by racism, but I'm also devastated by gender-based violence, right? That haunts many in our communities as well. And so I feel like we need to improve conditions for low-wage workers, particularly women of color. That's what Atlanta told us, right? That this wasn't just about one identity, that a perpetrator who hated that identity attacked that. In fact, yes, he targeted 3 Asian businesses, chose to go and harm, you know, predominantly Asian women, but it's the industry that they were in. It's also that they were women, right? To be perceived as disposable and not valued. So I feel like it's important for us to dismantle these kinds of systems and to make sure that when we are wanting to protect everybody, that it is important that Asian Americans are included, but that it has to be about also addressing those root causes.
Nikki?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Bo. I mean, you know, I also think that there is so much, I mean, there's so much work that needs to be done. I do believe that it starts from within us as people coming together. I like the veracity of Leanne's, you know, just getting people together and just making sure that we are all united and we are hearing the same message and the stories that we hear, you know, it's so important. I just recently attended a rally at the Castro last Sunday, and it was, there's something to be said about when people get together, especially for a certain cause, you know, for a certain reason. And I think we need to keep on continue doing all of this efforts. And we have to watch out for each other, most definitely, making sure that we are always present at tables where this racism and all of these things are being discussed. You know, it's so important to have a seat at the table, and at the same time, just making sure that you know, for me, I always look at, I don't look at the person per se, but I look at the behavior that they do and how that can impact other people, making people realize that that behavior is not appropriate or is not, should not be allowed, you know, so, and it could be corrected. So, you know. So.
And Leanna, you had already spoken of a few things that, you know, are great suggestions and recommendations for community members to be active. But in your mind, you know, is the United Peace Collaborative here to stay? It has to stay forever. I mean, how will it be sustained, or is it something that you think should be in addition to what we have in society?
Well, in my dreams, I wish I didn't have to do this. I was actually having vacation with my fiance. We were on a cruise on the first week of March, and when we came back from the cruise, we, you know, all this started, and we just felt like we had to do something. And of course, I wish that we weren't needed so that we can just, you know, go on with our merry lives. But it seems like now more than ever we're needed, and it doesn't look like it's slowing down. So we're going to be here for as long as we can, and thank goodness people are seeing what's going on and they're getting involved. We're getting a lot more donations. Our 501c3 is almost complete. And so, we're looking into hopefully getting some government support, some grants. Right now we have 0 funds from any city, state, or federal government agency, which, we're okay because we've been doing this all on our own dime with some donations from residents and merchants and individual donors, which we're very grateful of. So, we're going to be here for as long as we are needed, and if need be, make it something permanent. I mean, we are still processing the 501c3, which means that, hopefully somebody will step up and take my job soon, because I'm so ready to hand over the baton to somebody else. But as far as, I really agree with what Nikki was saying. When we look at crimes and stuff like that, we cannot look at people's race. We have to look at their behavior, who done what. So regardless of, with their race or color or origin or, or sexual orientation or whatever, we have to look at their behavior. If their behavior is harmful to society, it needs to be addressed. We can't just say, oh, it's slapped on the head, oh, they have this problem or this problem, or they come from a poor family or whatever. We cannot excuse that. We really cannot excuse that. I came from a really poor family. I was born in Toisan, China. It's a poor farming village. My toy was dirt and water in the pond in front of our village. So, I mean, the people here that live near me in Baby Hunters Point, they actually have a place to live. We live in shacks. And we farm the rice fields. So if you want to talk about social economic, I come from a very poor situation. So, people will argue, well, but you have a family structure. Yes, I have family structure. And I believe very firmly in a family structure, whether it's, 2 men, 2 women, men, women, or whatever the situation is, whether you're transgender or, I believe that you need to have a support system, no matter what that looks like. You have to have a support system. And I believe that every community can do that. It is not, people who say that, oh, well, we can't do that because we're not raised like that. But you can train yourself to do that. The beauty of being human is that we are adaptable, we are smart, and if we reach into our brains and reach into our hearts, we can do anything. And I believe that if everybody keeps talking about it, keeps raising awareness, and keep encouraging communities to rise up, I think that would be beautiful. There's a African-American leader right now. His name is Julian Gordon. He is teaching African Americans how to invest in properties, how to, build generational wealth. So we need to encourage more leaders like that. And then there's also a lot of Asian American leaders who are doing that as well in their education format to teach people how to be financially independent. In fact, Polly and Allie, they're perfect examples. They're teaching people how to, not be stuck in the financial bind. And it's very important that we have those education systems. And unfortunately, the public schools aren't teaching that, but they should. I mean, by the time you're in high school, you should know how to do your basic numbers in your checkbook. You should know how to file taxes. You should know how to fill out job applications, do all those things. Why aren't our schools teaching that? They should be teaching that. Back in the 80s when I was going to high school, we had mechanic shop, we had print shop, we had computer science, right? All these different things where you can, if you graduate high school, you could get a job just about anywhere. And a pretty good job where you can, back then, you could buy a house, even a minimum wage back then. So, there's a lot of socioeconomic inequality, but I think that also has to do with everything that's going on in terms of the education system. And that needs to be changed. But, that's also, I'm going to reiterate that there does need to be policing. I'm sorry, if you think that we need to get rid of the police, something's very wrong with that, because you cannot expect thugs to police the streets. Just cannot. There needs to be, but what needs to happen with the police is that they need more training. So when I was in the Army, I spent 11 years. I spent a lot of time. I was an equal opportunity officer. So I spent lots of time training about other cultures, about African-American culture, about the different Latino cultures. You know, Puerto Ricans don't like it when you call them Mexican. Okay. And same way, Mexicans don't like it when you call them Puerto Rican. And Chinese people don't like it when you call them Cambodian, and Thai people don't like it when you call them Japanese. So, you know, it's very important that our police officers now, they need to be better trained and be culturally sensitive about, you know, how they approach people, how they talk to people. And that's really, really important. Like, they need to start from getting to know people, de-escalating. But if they do, there are cases where they encounter very violent people. Don't fool yourself in thinking that there's no violent people out there. There are some really violent people that needs to be handled. So I think when people talk about defunding, they have to be very careful not to say, oh no, we don't need the police anymore. Well, you know what? What if that person comes at you at gunpoint? My very good friend, Kelvin Morgan, who's an African-American man, he was robbed at gunpoint when he was driving as an Uber driver. And let me tell you, he was praying a police officer was there. So when people talk about that, you have to be very careful what you wish for, because if there's no policing at all, guess what? I think those attacks might even go up. And I'm gonna be very real with you. I'm out there every day. I'm out there every day. And if you're not out there every day and you don't see it, I'm sorry. Everybody needs a reality check.
And if you're joining us and if you have a response or have a question, send them our way through the Zoom chat box there and we'll get them to our speakers. Does anyone want to respond to Leanna's comments from our panelists, Bo or Nikki?
Yeah, I think I'll just chime in. I mean, I think not a direct response about whether we need police. I just think that you know, the ways in which the police disproportionately hurt our communities, you know, I just think that that is something that we have to look at. Like there is definitely violence in our society, and that's really important. But racism, in most of the cases that have come to us, are things that the police won't do anything about, right? That create intimidation, that create fear for people, that are definitely discriminatory, but they're not punishable by law. And so that has everything to do with racism. That has everything to do with the fact that people don't know about Asian Americans. They don't see the experiences of Asian Americans as a part of our discussions about race, right, and racism. And I do think that it's really important to also recognize that, you know, a lot of, we're not born to be racist, we're taught to be racist, right? And so that ends up, and that lateral harm does in fact happen. So I'm not saying that just because you're a Black or brown person, you don't hurt each other. In fact, that happens because we live in proximity to each other, right? And so I think that's important, but I do think that my experience, and we had a situation here where a young man went to the bar, right? Someone is being super racist, they get into a fight and he punches the other guy, right? The police come, he's the one that's arrested. And now he has deportation orders. So I just want us to know that the consequences when you are a person of color, when you are an immigrant, they are, you know, multiple, right, and layered. And so as much as I do believe that there is violence and we need safety mechanisms, I also know that, you know, the ways in which police treat people of color is very different. and you know, that's important to acknowledge, right? Because that is embedded in the ways in which our systems are racist themselves, right? Even after Atlanta, where the killer is given the benefit of the doubt to say, well, he said it wasn't racism, so it's not racism. I think those things are extremely harmful to all of us, right? Who know that it is racism. So, you know, I want to just clarify my position on what I do think the police can do is, yes, please control white supremacy, right? The FBI said the most dangerous and harmful threat to domestic safety is extremist white supremacists. Why don't we know where they are? Why are white supremacists not arrested, when they commit crimes in our communities as well? And so I know this is hurtful to our community. I have been hearing about it since last year. We take cases and we provide victim services, and we work with systems to make sure that victims are supported, that we are working, educators who sometimes, they're teachers in front of students and they use words like China virus. Well, it ultimately impacts how other students treat that Asian student, right? And so all of those things are harmful, but I do want to say that racism has to be dealt systemically, and it is broad, and it is not just about the violent act that is committed, right?
Yeah, I also want to mention something about, I do agree with Leanna, like the police has its own serve in terms of like our community, but I also agree with Bo because there's a very deep history of trans folks who have been victimized by the police in so many different ways, just because of how we look, of how we portray ourselves, or how we even walk down the streets, and that's why whenever you talk to trans folks, the police is not their favorite topic to talk about, and I think there needs to be more dealt more in terms of like really finding the root cause of these things, and that's a whole different topic. We really do need to talk about that separately, but there is that piece that, not all policemen are good policemen, and it's sad because it could have been a better world, so.
Thank you so much, Nikki. I'm going to turn to our audience questions now. Thank you so much for submitting your comments and questions. Carol, I want to start with you, and I know that we already touched on the topic of gender and how it impacts our communities as far as violence goes. But you also had a question of, I think this is for Leanna. What do you think of having at least 50% or even more police being women, maybe all women? What do you think?
I think women deal with problems a lot differently than men, for sure. I mean, the fact that there are so many other patrol groups out there, and that, I really don't know what they do in their groups, but as far as my group is concerned, I think I'm one of the few woman-led groups. We're very structured. I almost kind of like act like a mommy. They call me UPC mommy because I am very detailed about everything. So from doing the dishes and keeping our office clean to making sure all of our files are good and ready. I think as a woman, we do it very differently. We're more of like a nurturing, we kind of like teach our members as we would like teach our children. And of course, the leadership, the vice president, treasurers, and secretaries, they're kind of like my spouses, my extended spouses. We have men and women in the board, but they're kind of like my partners and everything, right? I have to go through everything that I want to do. I have to go through them, ask for their permission and whatnot. So I think that's very important. I was in a group previously before UPC, and it was more like it was a man who was in charge, and basically, if he said something we didn't agree with it, it was his way or highway. And that's why Robert and I left and formed our own group, and I'm more of like get everybody's opinion and experience, and like these ladies are saying, everybody has a different experience with the police. And even some of our partners in UPC, they're like, oh yeah, I've been harassed, this time or that time. And it's real, that's real. What happens to them is real. So I've known, people that have been harassed, or, have other even more subtle racism, like, if they're part of the police force. I know some of the officers say, I was the only Asian American in a certain police office, and they treated me like, I'm nobody, like I don't belong there, and they exclude me from lunches and stuff like that. And I experienced that myself when I was in the military. where I worked in the Madigan Hospital, where I was actually invited by one of my coworkers to lunch. And then when I got there, everybody looked like him. They were all blonde hair, blue eyes. They didn't want to talk to me. And I sat there the whole time eating my lunch and nobody even said hi to me or anything. And I just felt like, I said, Albert, next time don't invite me to these lunches. I just sat there like I was just a flower. I just sat there and nobody talked to me the whole time. And, you probably don't even realize that's called subtle discrimination or racism. So you know what, I'd rather just go eat by myself. I'd be happy doing that. But so as far as but women, I think not only does it need to be at least close to 50% women, I think also women of different ethnicities is very important, because we bring in perspective that maybe some other ethnicities cannot bring in. I think a white woman and an African American woman and an Asian woman have different views, have very different views, and it's so important that every department has more diversity to help people understand, what actually happens in their neighborhood and how they would deal with it. Some things that work for one neighborhood doesn't work for another, So it's like, people from Chinatown, if they come into Bayview and start talking smack to people in Bayview, they won't have it. It doesn't work. It doesn't work like that, And same as some people, and the vice versa. If some people come from Bayview, they go to Chinatown and try to talk smack the way they do there, it doesn't work. So it's so important that we have more diversity training within the police department. So that way, everybody feels that they could be a part of it.
Thank you so much, Leanna. I'm going to go to a question from Madison, and Bo, will have you answer this question, but can you talk about the dynamics of assimilation of Asians into American culture, specifically relating to law enforcement and political views?
That's such, it's a complicated response because the Asian American community is so diverse, right? There's so many different immigration paths that have brought us here. And so, I'm Hmong American, part of the Southeast Asian diaspora that came here post the wars in Southeast Asia. And as a refugee, my family came here, not because we wanted to, but because we had to in order to survive, right? Otherwise, worse things could have happened. And when we arrived, we were plopped in really the poorest parts of towns, right? And that was predominantly Black and brown neighborhoods. And, my parents were given their airplane tickets to start paying back on and all of those things. And I know all the perceptions that people have about refugees and that they get, free cars, well, no, you don't get anything for free. You get brought here, you are given your airplane tickets, and they start, billing you for those airplane tickets, right? And then you have sponsors who help you to adjust. And that is a very different experience than what we've seen here in Minnesota in the last, I would say 10, 15 years, is really because our economy demands it. We have a very educated Asian population that's immigrating here through from China and India and things. And, and so we all come together and we make up the fabric of what is Asian, right? And then we have those who've been here for generations, 3, 4, 5 generations even of Chinese Americans, Japanese Americans. And then we also have, Filipino Americans who immigrated here after the wars, and they're still trying to reunite with their family members from the Philippines, right? So I would say there is not one narrative about our integration into America, but it is the story of America, right? Which is that even as refugees, we picked to come to this country because we really believed that it would provide an opportunity, right? That, if we work hard and if we come, with aspirations that we can achieve. And I think the question is, does that hold true, right? Does that hold true for many Americans? And when I look at my own Southeast Asian community, I know that what often gets hidden is also hidden by things like the model minority myth, right? Or our inability to accept the diversity within the diversity. And so we want to just, in a broad brush, just say Asian American, but there's a very different experience from being Hmong than there is from being Chinese, or all of those things. While there are some shared values and things like that, and shared ambitions for coming to America, that story is really different. So I really just caution people from saying there is one Asian American story, because there are many different Asian American stories. And actually, it just is getting more complicated, right? Because we are the most diverse that we have ever been in history in terms of our communities. And the biggest growth has been post 1965, when the immigration law changed and allowed for finally more immigration from China, from Asia, right? Because before that, there was very little paths here. So, just part of that history is not taught, right? And I really value that people can talk about their ethnic identities and their journeys here, and because that's worth hearing.
Thank you so much, Bo. I can't believe it, but if we're already at like an hour, where did the time go? I can listen to all three of you and the work that you do for many more hours. In fact, we all should join you in the work that you do. The final question that I have for you is around sharing your final thoughts on the importance of building coalition. Each and every one of you reach out to other communities, other members, whether it's race, whether it's gender. We need that in order to have the change. So we'll start with Nikki. Especially I would love for you to talk about the fact that, when it comes to HIV/AIDS, when it comes to transgender, when it comes to AAPI, your work centers the marginalized. At the same time, you're calling in so many people, and some people where you have to change their hearts and minds in order for our community to stay alive and to thrive. So let's start there. Nikki?
Yeah, I mean, I've been in this work for almost 25, 26 years, like I started 7 years old. No, just kidding. But it's like, one thing I have learned that really helped me a lot in terms of making sure that the work that I do is always in line is that I look at the bigger picture. I have to look at the bigger picture of everything and how it impacts everybody. And I don't put myself in there, but I put the client in front of me first, and the people that I serve, and how these things are impacting them, because it really is about our people. It is really about our people. I'm just a vessel to do all this work, and I also have my own opinions and my own beliefs and everything, but it really has made me stronger and to be more adaptable and flexible, because there are times when you have to really look at situations, complicated situations, where sometimes you need to really step back and look at it and see how everybody can work together. That's my thing. So,
Leanna?
Yes, yeah, collaboration is so important. I'm so happy to say that there are so many patrol groups out there right now in San Francisco, Chinatown, in Los Angeles, in San Jose, and in Oakland, and New York. And we're actually we're all working together. Like tomorrow we have a rally, and there's actually going to be 2 rallies, one starting at City Hall at 11 a.m. and one starting at Portsmouth Square at 11 a.m. as well. And there's at least 10 organizations that are putting this together. So it's nonstop collaboration for us with other patrol groups, with other nonprofits, with family associations, with real estate associations, with a lot of nonprofits, community-based organizations in the area. It's so important. And we were just talking to Polly and Allie about starting something in North Carolina where they're at. There's so many things that we need to do to reach out across cities, cross countries, and just work with each other, because bottom line, at the end of the day, we all want a better world for everybody. We want everybody to feel safe. And if that means that, you know, we advocate for police reform, but in a way that is going to be helpful to the society and not hurtful, you know, so those are very important things that we look at. Unfortunately, I really believe the situation in San Francisco, the reforms are not working. They're just being soft on crime does not work. They need to train the officers on how to be more culturally sensitive, how to be more sensitive to the LGBT community, as well as you know, senior citizens and working with disabled and youth. There's so many different things that need to be addressed. They can't just train people how to shoot, run, hide, and then, you know, put them on a street. That's not enough. They need to provide a lot more training than that. So, you know, and we actually collaborate with the police sometimes. So it's important that we know that when we work with them, that they're doing what's best for the community at all times as well, because we're going to hold them accountable as well. You know, I might not be the police commissioner, but we all kind of should be, everybody should be the so-called police commissioner, right? We have to not only make them accountable, but all the politicians accountable, everybody who is in some kind of power position, whatever they do, we have to hold them accountable. But we have to work with them. So it's such a delicate balance, you know? So, and thank you guys for being here today. And thank you for giving me a chance to speak. I know we might not be all in agreement with every subject, but I feel your passion. And it means so much to me that you're here to at least talk about it. We should start dialogue. And I think the more we talk to each other, eventually we will come up with very good solutions.
Thank you so much, Leanna. And finally, Bo, and since it is the Michelle Meow Show, I mean, I would love for you to give your final thoughts on the importance of building coalition, but with this statement that I have to make, that white supremacy is the root of racialized hate. And so with that being said, building coalition and calling our communities in is the only path forward to dismantle what I just said. So, Bo?
Thank you, Michelle, and really thank you for having me. And, you know, it's such an honor to be here with Nikki and Leanna as well. I think this is exactly what we need to do more of, right? Have conversations to build the communities that we want. And so I just leave with the belief that our liberations are tied together. If I am not safe, you are not safe, right? If I am not free, you are not free. And because we are not one-dimensional people, you know, I'm not just an Asian person. I'm also a woman. I'm a mother. I'm an immigrant. You know, English is my second language. And, you know, having said that, we are born into systems that give power and privilege because of differing identities. And so to the extent that we have to get to know each other, we have to build relationships that are deeply invested in each other so that we can talk about what are the kinds of communities that we want to build, right? And how do we not just ensure that for me or for you, but for everyone, so that we can intentionally confront that which is harmful, that we can disrupt behaviors that are not healthy, but that we can actually build communities that are abundant and loving and see each other's humanities. So the only way out of this is really through solidarity. And you can't get solidarity unless you are working across communities. So I just leave with you with those words and say it's really up to us.
Thank you so much. Thank you to our speakers tonight, Nikki Kalma, Bo Taoyarabe, and Leanna Louie. Please follow their work, support them if you can. Thank you to our sponsor, Ali Polly and Associates. And of course, thank you to the Commonwealth Club of California for providing the platform and bringing us all together. If you'd like to see all of our programs or look up any past programs, you can head to commonwealthclub.org, or you can go to commonwealthclub.org/MMS for future Michelle Meow Show programs next week. I will share my journey of alopecia areata and the impacts of the pandemic the trauma that my body faced. So hence why the hair is cropped and short. It's beginning to grow back though. I really want to thank you all for joining us and spending your Friday evening. Let's make it a better place for all of us, make it more safe and equitable and just. Be safe, be healthy. We'll see you next time.